Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black Mike podcast with myself, Newcastle United editor Aaron Stokes. And we're here today, Thursday, June 27th, to bring you a little bit of a transfer special, given that there's been plenty of updates with regards to potential players leaving and joining Newcastle United in the last couple of days. We'll bring you all the latest on Minter, who looks set to leave Newcastle before June 30th, and also some other players who could be making their way out the door. We'll also have plenty of speculation and analysis about players who could be coming in as Newcastle look to make some moves in the transfer market. If you're watching us on YouTube, thanks very much for joining, and please remember to drop us a follow and a like the video. And also, if you're listening on your podcast provider, thank you very much as well. But we'll get straight into it. And I'm going to start with potentially some good news for Newcastle United in terms of who could be coming in, because we've learned in the last 24 hours that Newcastle have made a move for young Serbian defender Mladen Pivas, who joins from a newly promoted Serbian side. If anybody was outside St James's Park yesterday, taking in the new temporary club store, taking in maybe some of the scenery outside Shearer's Bar, you wouldn't have even known that you were walking past a potential Newcastle United signing, because Pivas was spotted outside St James's Park on Wednesday. Some eagle-eyed fans somehow got wind that he was there, and we've had it confirmed that Newcastle United are closing in on what seems a very, very exciting deal for a young player who is very, very highly rated in Serbia. Now, Pivas, as I mentioned, is a central defender, but he can also play at central defensive midfield. He played 30 times last season across 4 competitions in Serbia, where his side gained promotion from the second division to the top division. 20 of those games he played at centre-back, and crucially, he played on the right-hand side of the central defensive partnership. And 10 of those games he played in central defensive midfield. He's also played a couple of games in the number 10 role, which goes to show that he's clearly a very, very versatile player. 19 years old, as I mentioned, it's expected that he will join the club's under-21 ranks. It's also been talked about in the Serbian media that he could be loaned straight back to his home country for a year, or he could also join Vitesse Arnhem in the Netherlands, who have just been relegated from the Eredivisie. So there's a couple of options there, but it does look like Pivas is going to be the latest youth signing to join Newcastle United. They've obviously had a lot of young players who have signed in the last couple of seasons. Predominantly, it was pushed by Dan Ashworth, the outgoing sporting director, that they would get this massive wealth of young talent through the door, the likes of Charlie MacArthur, the likes of Alfie Harrison, Trayvon Sanusi, Travis Hearns, all these young players that they've picked from around the UK and from around Europe, with the hope that they can eventually knock on the first team door in the future. Now, obviously very, very early days in terms of Pivas and his career, but the word coming out of Serbia is very, very promising for this teenager. Now, I just want to read you some quotes from a couple of players and managers who have worked with Pivas already in his career, starting with Nemanja Matic, who you might remember played for Manchester United and Chelsea, Roma, Lyon, a couple of these teams, an absolute Serbian legend. He was speaking about Pivas back in April, and he said he's a great talent and has serious potential. If he continues like this, he will be on the way to the national team, in my opinion. A player with such predispositions has not appeared since Nemanja Vidic and Branislav Ivanovic, a complete player and a top professional. Now, if you're a defender who's playing in Serbia, or you're a Serbian national, I don't think there could be two better comparisons for somebody to make. Nemanja Vidic, Manchester United legend, and Chelsea hero Branislav Ivanovic, two Premier League icons. So clearly, I mean, look, there's a long way to go before Pivas reaches that level, but clearly they've got very high hopes for him back in Serbia. Now, his assistant manager at the team that he currently plays for also said it's really refreshing to see such a young player who approaches his duties so seriously and professionally. He's always in a good mood and does his best to meet the demands and expected from him. There's a lot of room for improvement, but I have no doubt that he will achieve his full potential. Now, Pivas was out of contract this summer, so you suspect that it's not going to cost Newcastle United too much to get him. Also, playing in the second division of Serbian football, you can imagine that the wages weren't too costly either. So this looks like a very, very exciting deal for Newcastle United, a deal that's flown under the radar, both across Europe and also for Newcastle. They've got it done very, very quietly. And also, they seemingly have beaten off some competition, given that if this is what people are saying about Pivas in his home country, then there's clearly a lot to like about him. as I mentioned, there could be potentially a loan deal there to get him some first-team football. And if not, you'd expect him to go into the under-21 setup at Newcastle, where he can hopefully continue his development. That one's not done yet, but it does look like Newcastle United are close to that deal. Obviously, we suspect that one might have to get done in July when that contract expires, but very, very exciting. And if you were outside St James's Park yesterday and you happened to take photos, have a look in the background to see if Mladen Pivas was in them, Newcastle United's potential new signing. Now, we'll stick with the theme of incomings. Now, there's nothing as close as that, unfortunately, for Newcastle United. They had a lot of talk over the weekend that Calvert-Lewin was the man that Newcastle United wanted. Now, this was partly to do with Minter, who we're going to touch on in a lot of detail later in this video, in this episode. Calvert-Lewin, Everton striker, previously very, very injury prone in his career. Last season, he did manage 38 games for Everton, which was his best return for a number of years. But serious doubts about Calvert-Lewin's injury record. We know that Everton were very, very keen to do a deal for Minter before that broke down, and that in turn was going to allow Newcastle United to go out and spend money on Calvert-Lewin. Now, we suspect if that deal had have got over the line, if negotiations hadn't fallen through for that, Calvert-Lewin would have came to Newcastle as a backup to Alexander Isak and potentially a replacement for Callum Wilson, who we suspect will leave Newcastle United in the next couple of weeks or months. But I think opinion was definitely split on this potential transfer. A lot of fans saying, look, Calvert-Lewin, 5 years younger than Callum Wilson, Premier League experience, had a very, very good run at Everton under Carlo Ancelotti when he forced his way into the England side to become essentially the number 2 to Harry Kane just 3 or 4 years ago. A lot of fans also saying, whoa, hang on, we're potentially selling Callum Wilson for not that much money and spending a lot of money in the grand scheme of things on Calvert-Lewin, who obviously has his injury concerns, obviously has a little bit of form concerns as well, given that he actually scored less than Callum Wilson last season, despite playing 12 games less and only really missing 6 games through injury. We obviously learned over the weekend that talks had collapsed. That story was broken by Lee Ryder, who reported that Newcastle had stepped away from a deal for Calvert-Lewin. And as we understand at the minute, it doesn't look like Newcastle United are going to go back in for that signing. And some of the fees that were being talked about, the likes of 37 million, 40 million for Calvert-Lewin, I think Newcastle United fans, or the bulk of them, will be quite relieved that Newcastle are set to walk away from that deal. Going to the opposite end of the pitch, Newcastle United have also been linked with a lot of central defenders in the last couple of days, and I think it's quite telling that Newcastle's name has been used quite a lot in the European media, especially in Italy, to potentially drum up some attention for their players. But also, I think it points to the fact that Newcastle United will go out and sign another central defender before the end of the window. Now, they've brought Lloyd Kelly in, fantastic deal. A young player who has got plenty of attributes that you like, and he knows how well he can slot straight in to the central defensive partnership on the left before Sven Botman arrives. He can also, Sven Botman returns, sorry, he can also play out at left back, 25 years old. Another one with maybe slight injury concerns, but for a free transfer, that was one that I think we can all get on board with. Now, I think what Newcastle United are going to do now is look for potentially a right-sided central defender, someone who's a lot younger than Fabian Schär, and someone who can eventually take his place in the first team, if not this season, when he sort of maybe heads out the door or retires in a couple of years' time. Plenty of names linked in the last couple of days, and some very, very exciting ones, starting with Fikayo Tomori, previously of Chelsea, now at AC Milan. Some say very, very unlucky not to make the England European Championship squad this summer after a very good season in Italy. Reports in that country suggest that a fee of around 30 to 40 million euros might be enough to get a deal for Fikayo Tomori over the line, which I think fans would be very, very pleased with. Sticking with AC Milan, since those Tomori links have came out, we've also had a lot of speculation over Malik Thiaw, another central defender who plays at the San Siro, very, very highly rated, and again, one who would probably only cost 30 million euros, which you suspect will be in Newcastle United's budget this summer once they start to offload some of those fringe players. Now, The German international, very, very talented, and a player who Newcastle United have tracked for a number of windows, not just this one. And I suspect he would be a very, very popular addition if they can get a deal over the line for him. Moving from Milan over to Juventus, there was short-lived speculation early on Wednesday that Federico Gatti was a player that Newcastle United were interested in, but we understand that that is a non-starter. Newcastle United have not had any formal contact with Juventus over that player, and we don't expect them to make a move. There's also been plenty of talk about Riccardo Calafiori, who's having a fantastic Euros with Italy. But I think personally that that's just a case of Newcastle United and a few other big names being linked with his name as Bologna try and get the best price for him after what promises to be a very, very exciting summer campaign in Germany for him. But I think Newcastle United, and we've got to go back to the start of the summer where before they'd even got Lloyd Kelly in, they missed out on Tosin Adarabioyo, who ended up leaving Fulham on a free and joining Chelsea. Newcastle United was so keen to get him through the door on a free transfer, and I think the fact that they haven't been able to do that shows that Eddie Howe's probably going to have to go out and spend a little bit of money on a right-sided central defender, which, if anybody's listened to this podcast or watched our YouTube videos in the last couple of months, you know that I think it's a massive priority finding somebody who can rival Fabian Schär and eventually take his place and become Sven Botman's long-term partner. But let's just hold our horses for a little bit, because Newcastle United can't go out and spend money unless they're going to bring some money in. And the one player that it looks like they're going to potentially cash in on in the next couple of days, as I said earlier, we're recording this on June 27th, and we know that the profit and sustainability rules deadline is in a couple of days on June 30th. Newcastle need to balance the books before that date to make sure that for the 3-year period of PSR, they are meeting their obligations and they're not subject to a potential points deduction like we saw with Everton and like we saw with Nottingham Forest. I'm sure if you've been on social media in the last couple of days, you'll have seen plenty of talk about Everton and Aston Villa doing some deals with each other, plenty of talk of Chelsea and Aston Villa and Everton and Villa doing deals where essentially they're swap deals. One team is signing a player, sticking them on a 5-year contract to essentially spread that transfer fee over 5 years in terms of the accounting. At the same time, they're then selling a player to that club where they can record that entire transfer fee on this year's budget and essentially be self-sustaining and within those obligations for PSR. Very, very tricky business. That was a very short explanation of what is a very complex and controversial rule that the Premier League have brought in. But it does mean that Newcastle United have to sell players before June 30th. And it's no surprise, really, when you think some of the players that have left Newcastle United in the last couple of seasons, Alan St-Maximum, John Joe Shelvey, Chris Wood, they're not superstar big names who are going to bring in 40, 50 million pounds worth of revenue. On the flip side, Newcastle United have obviously went out and spent massive amount of money on Sandro Tonali, Alexander Isak, Bruno, Botman, Anthony Gordon. And although they've massively increased their commercial revenue, their sponsorship revenue, their match day revenue, their income streams are growing pretty much every week, Newcastle need to make sure that they're going to sell a player. Now, we understand that is likely to be Jan Kuba Minter, 19 years old. He has not kicked a ball for Newcastle United, and yet they value him at a massive fee of around 40 million, and they don't want to get less than that fee for him. Since Newcastle United put Jan Kuba Minter on the market, there's been an absolute flurry of interest for his services. You've had Brighton and Everton as two Premier League clubs very, very interested. You also have had Dortmund from Germany, you've had Roma from Italy, you've had Lyon, and you've had Marseille. You've had 6 or 7 teams from across Europe linked, some tentatively, some very, very clearly linked with a move for Jan Kuba Minter, who seemingly has his heart set on a Premier League move. Now, we understand that he had agreed terms with the club over the weekend. That looks like it's fallen through after the Everton deal fell through. Brighton's still in the mix, and Lyon, reportedly from some usually quite safe sources in France, Lyon were at the front of the market for him. Now, I decided to take a little bit of a deep dive yesterday into some of these clubs' finances to see, can they actually afford Jan Kuba Minter? Newcastle United, if they want 40 million from him, are they actually realistically going to get that in this market? Now, just starting with Dortmund, Champions League finalists, huge fan base, global recognition around the world, lots of revenue streams, a club that spend plenty of money on transfers when they want to. But actually, when you look at their finances and you look at some of the reports that have been coming out during the last couple of days, 40 million might actually be a stretch for the club. Now, Ian Maatsen, who is actually part of one of those deals that I've just mentioned between Chelsea and Aston Villa, he spent last season on loan at Dortmund, where he was very, very impressive. Chelsea, who need to sell players, essentially said at Dortmund, look, you can have him on a permanent deal, 40 million euros, and he's yours. And Dortmund said, whoa, that is far too much. Now, if Newcastle United are going to hold out for more like 46, 47 million euros, which equates to 40 million pounds, it doesn't look like Dortmund are going to be in a position to do such deal. They've also had Jadon Sancho on loan, who could potentially be joining the club on a permanent deal, which would essentially mean that they don't need Minter to fill what would be the same position in the attack. And also, just a point that I stumbled across yesterday, which I thought was very interesting. There's only been 5 transfers in Bundesliga history that would be more than the 47 million that Newcastle United want, 47 million euros. And all 5 of those transfers have been conducted by, drumroll please, Bayern Munich. You guessed it. So Harry Kane, 95 million euros. Lucas Hernandez, 80 million euros. Matthias de Ligt, 67 million euros. Min-Jae Kim, 50 million euros. And Manchester City's Leroy Sané signed for 49 million euros. Minter, if he joins Dortmund, will become the 6th highest Bundesliga transfer, which would not be a bad start given that he's only 19. Moving on then to Roma, who have been speculatively linked in Italy. They have signed players of this ilk before in terms of the price tag. They spent 42 million euros on Patrick Schick back in 2018, and they also spent 41 million to sign Tammy Abraham from Chelsea back in 2021. So Roma have, in the past said, you know what, yeah, we'll spend this type of money on one player. But Il Messaggero in Italy, one Italian newspaper says that they think they probably only have a budget this summer of 30 million euros before they sell players, although they can probably sell Tammy Abraham and Paulo Dybala this summer. Moving on to France then, because this is where there's been some real concrete interest in Minteh in the last couple of days. Now, Lyon, as I mentioned earlier, looked like they were at the front of the queue. There was reports yesterday and reports that we've checked up that Lyon actually had a agreement in place with Newcastle, but Minter has turned down the move to France. He said he's not interested in playing for Lyon. Now, I find that very, very interesting because, again, I've sort of dived into the numbers. Now, Lyon's record transfer fee was Joachim Andersen, who is obviously now of Crystal Palace. He signed for 24 million euros plus 6 million euros in add-ons back in 2020. So you would essentially be asking Lyon to essentially double their record transfer fee for a 19-year-old player who has not actually played any football for Newcastle United. It's a big ask. Marseille, similarly, who have been linked, their record fee is 32 million. So again, they're going to be paying 15 million if Newcastle United get the valuation that they desire. And again, just to look even further into the type of transfers that have been done in these leagues over the years, similarly to Bayern Munich dominating those huge transfer fees in Germany, this time around in Ligue 1, you can guess that it's PSG who have absolutely decimated the market in terms of income and signings. Now, of the 25 highest signings in French history, in Ligue 1 history, 22 of them have signed for PSG, and the other 3 have signed for Monaco. Marseille and Lyon are absolutely nowhere to be seen when it comes to these, huge record deals. So again, that just goes to prove the point that I think, either of those clubs signing Minter this summer would be quite unlikely, especially if he has his heart set on a Premier League move. Now that is, that moves us nicely onto the Premier League interest in Minter. We've talked about Everton, how, a deal did break down over the last couple of days. Brighton, very, very interested if they could pull off the deal because they have a fantastic track record of signing young players, usually very obscure, young players who haven't got much experience in Europe. Dan Ashworth was an absolute master of this when he was working on the South Coast. If Brighton, if their interest is legit, they can definitely afford, they could probably afford 2 or 3 Minters because they are such a well-run club. And it was only earlier this year that they actually set the record for the most profit made by an English club in a single season, and that was £115 million in a single year of profit. Now, that is before you even take into account the 115 million that they got off Chelsea for Moises Caicedo, which isn't actually on those books that they've accounted for. So they are in such a good financial situation. They spent £30 million on João Pedro, who is, a little bit more experienced than Yankuba Minter, but a young talent who hasn't yet filled his potential. And they also spent £23 million on a 19-year-old Carlos Baleba just last summer. They've got a track record of spending a lot of money for these young players. So it wouldn't be out of the question if Brighton's interest was legit. I think that deal probably ticks a lot of boxes, both for Newcastle, because they can probably get a fee that they want from Brighton. Obviously then get a player that they want and someone that they can mould and, make a very, very good player out of. Yankuba Minter gets his dream of playing in the Premier League. It ticks a lot of boxes. So I think personally, if any club out of those that have been linked so far is going to sign Minter, I think Brighton are probably well placed to do just that. But there is going to be debates about Yankuba Minter. Some fans, and I'm probably on this side of the fence, think 19 years old. We haven't seen him kick a ball for Newcastle. He was signed with so much promise. Enjoyed a very, very good loan spell at Feyenoord this year where they were very, very pleased with him. Are we letting go a player who could potentially become a superstar? Then there'll be the other people, probably the more pragmatic people, the more sensible people, dare I say, who say, look, we've signed this player for 6.5 million last year. He hasn't even played for Newcastle, and we're going to potentially get 30, 35, 40 million from him. It's an absolute no-brainer if you include some sort of clause which says we get a buyback option, or we get a sell-on fee, or one of these clauses where Newcastle aren't just saying, look, you can have one of our best players because we need to meet these PSR demands. So, as I say, the next couple of days for Minter are going to be absolutely crucial. Other players naturally linked with moves away, the likes of Kieran Trippier, the likes of Miguel Almiron, the likes of Callum Wilson. One thing I will say about those exits is a lot of those players, if not all of them, have been attracting some interest from Saudi Arabia, and their transfer window does not open until July 17th. So you suspect that there'll be a couple of weeks until maybe they get going. You've also got to take into account that Trippier is away at the Euros with England. Miguel Almiron is away with Paraguay at the Copa America. So their full focus will be on their country rather than their club future. But I think those players are certainly the most likely to leave Newcastle United, more so than Bruno Guimaraes, more so than Alexander Isak, which fans will be pleased to know. There we go then. A little bit of a transfer update there after, as I said, what's been a very, very busy couple of days. We suspect as that deadline for PSR approaches on June 30th, there'll be a lot more movement. We'll bring you all the latest updates and analysis. We've got a dedicated live transfer blog on the Chronicle Live website. We've also got plenty of transfer stories on there for you to go and read. We'll also have plenty more podcasts and more YouTube videos for you guys on all of our channels. So please do keep an eye out for those. Until then, thanks very much for watching or listening to this episode, and we'll speak to you very, very soon.